What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking after for the future. I'm also going to address some concerns out there about the whole market crash that a lot of people are talking about and break down how this could end up affecting Tesla and whether or not it's going to happen this year based off what we're seeing in the market right now. Now, before I break anything down about this, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. Now, anyways, guys, I want to talk about Tesla with you and talk about what just happened. Obviously, we had to move over 6% to the upside on Friday. It actually broke above some major resistance levels above 200, above 202.5, 205, and now we actually got rejected very close to where the daily 200 EMA is, very close to 208. So the real question is what's going to happen. I want to just quickly review a couple of things about Tesla in this video because I might not be available to record a video tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure if I can. And I most likely will be able to at least record something very short, but I just want to note that in case I don't record something, in case there's no video tomorrow, I want to just give you guys an update on what's happening with deliveries. Deliveries are coming out on Sunday at about, I believe it's going to be about 12:05 p.m. Eastern time, so quite early, not necessarily too late. During the last report, we had about 405,000 in Q4, and it's most likely going to be the case that Q1 is going to be higher, most definitely. I mentioned more details about this in my video from yesterday if you want to know more about the numbers. They're most likely going to kill it in China, in Europe. We're just not as sure about the USA as inventory levels went up. Demand was a little bit nuanced, but overall, I'm very optimistic, and I do believe the odds do favor Tesla continuing to break out. And I do believe it's very likely Tesla will not necessarily disappoint lots of investors. So once again, April 2nd is going to be the big day, right? On Sunday. Please be ready for it. Wall Street is expecting 432,000 deliveries once again coming out at the time. If Tesla misses, all right, always be prepared for this just in case. If it misses, expect this thing to gap down and come all the way back down to fill this gap, right? If we see something like around 415,000, 418,000, or even lower, just for example, then it's most likely going to fill this gap. It's most likely going to come all the way down back to the 190s, unfortunately. I think that's quite unlikely, though, after the numbers I'm seeing, and also because of Tesla's history of typically beating big time and not necessarily like letting investors down. So what's going to happen if Tesla meets expectations? It's most likely going to continue to rally because you have to think about the facts that this would be the highest quarter of all time for Tesla again, once again beating Q4. And once again, that's very, very awesome news for investors. It could easily break this 208 level and start to push to this chop zone around this like 210 to 212 area. If it breaks that, there's like the 215 zone, followed by 220 to 225. In my opinion, it can most definitely reach those levels if we get a really good report. If Tesla kills it and they give us something like, instead of 432,000, they give us like 440,000, 450,000, just for example. If that happens, this thing is going to rocket. Shorts are going to get squeezed. It's just going to explode to the moon. Looking at this on the daily time frame, I know it's a little messy with all these drawings since I usually use that for the hourly. What's going to happen is if we actually kill it by that margin, we're going to break above the 200 EMA, above 208, and start pushing very, very high, get very close to, in my opinion, 220. Now, the odds are favoring that, but make sure you're prepared for anything just in case. I always say this on the channel. We had this potential inverse head and shoulders right here. The right shoulder, the left shoulder is already playing out, and it's most likely going to take this thing all the way up to this 210 zone, if not higher, to about 217 plus. It could even break out higher. That is most likely what's going to happen. Once again, though, it depends on delivery, so we'll just have to wait and see. But now I'm talking about some very bullish price action for Tesla. I was talking this week about the markets, and I told you guys we're likely going to see a squeeze. That is what ended up happening. But then the question is, what happened to the crash? What happened to the crash a lot of people were talking about? What happened to the market getting a big, correction? I even mentioned that on this channel. That's very possible for something like that to play out. And I want to break down the way sentiment shifts in this market and how forgetful the market could be. We have a very irrational market that loves to just rally during big moments like this, and also loves to see very exaggerated responses to data. So we have a very, very mixed market. But I just want to remind you that yes, there's upside in the markets. Yes, the upside is likely going to continue, but it's most likely going to be temporary because I do see another pullback coming in the upcoming weeks. I think for the overall market, once the bank earnings come out, it could negatively affect Tesla. But as I mentioned in one of my earlier videos from, I believe it was last week, we have two big catalysts for the month of April. It's not just one. The first catalyst is obviously deliveries, which is coming out in just, I believe, tomorrow, if you're watching this on Saturday. The second catalyst is going to be earnings. And if Tesla kills it during earnings, it could outperform the market for even longer durations of time. I think deliveries will be very telling about how earnings is going to be. If Tesla misses on deliveries, earnings may not be that great. If Tesla beats by a big margin, there's a good chance we're going to get another decent earnings for Tesla, which could be bullish for the share price. But even if Tesla does, pump for the majority of April, there's no guarantee. Once again, this is going to last for a very, very long period of time. There's no guarantee it's going to be sustainable. That's once again because of the current financial conditions. I want to remind you all that the Fed most likely would have given us a 50 basis point rate hike during the last FOMC meeting if it wasn't for the banks, which started to show lots of signs of weakness, which caused them to actually slow down a bit. This did actually cause the Fed to slow down. And if they didn't do that, the market would have tanked, right? So the banking situation, in a way, led to the market ending the market to rally, excuse me, because of the fact that the Fed actually transitioned away from quantitative tightening temporarily. You could see it right here since we actually started around April to May of 2022. The Fed has been actually continuing to reduce their balance sheet. This in turn actually was a big part of the tightening process, but then they ended up increasing the balance sheet by another, believe it was like $400 billion. They did this to help the banks in essence. Now, one thing to remember is the FDIC is actually helping the banks during this time, but that does not change the fact that in the future there are still major risks out there. Depositors have yanked another $126 billion from the banks, unfortunately, and there is a risk of contagion that still exists. Now, as bank earnings fall and we do enter a potential earnings recession as the economy contracts, I do believe that these earnings are not going to be as great going into like Q3, Q4, maybe even Q2. And for this quarter, at least the earnings coming out during this cycle, I'm once again not necessarily like extremely bullish. I'm going to be very apprehensive and cautious during this time. I also want to add to the facts that we're still not in a great place. All right, our economy is still not in a good place. If you look at the prolonged period of loose monetary policy after the global financial crisis, this has actually led to very loose regulations for the banks. This gave banks a lot of freedom to just continue to lend out money and to end up taking some pretty horrible risks in a way. Many banks were overleveraged in bonds and also mortgage backed securities. Other ones were overleveraged in risky startups and other things like that. So now seeing the Fed continuing to tighten, it's just really hurt their assets and caused a lot of banks to lose money, forcing them to sell their assets for massive losses. This is similar to what happened in 2008. I just don't think it's going to be as extreme because of how some regulations have changed. But besides that, I still think it is a recession that's coming. We're going to see unemployment just start to skyrocket very soon. A recession is still a recession, whether you like it or not, whether you want to admit it or not, it is still going to be the case. Now, the market is pretty neutral right now. And this is important because we're getting closer to the greedy side again, and the market is once again continuing to be living in this euphoria. Now, when the market moves like this, I know that these moves may not be backed fundamentally, but it's very important to be able to adjust to them. If we remain bears forever, we're going to lose money, lots and lots of money in this market because the market's not just crashing, it's jumping back and forth. It's like a kangaroo going back and forth, up and down, all over the place. It's pretty crazy. And if this becomes greedy, which is still very possible, once again, the market could have more room to keep going forward. That could be bullish for Tesla for the short term. But like I said before, I mean, that does not necessarily save us for what's about to come. Now, Jim Cramer is saying that he's not seeing the early signs of a recession yet, even if it's coming. We know that's not the best of signs. Many analysts projected that we could be entering a recession right now. We just don't know just yet because the data won't be coming out for a while, right? It takes a while for the GDP reports to come out and other pieces of data. So we just have to be patient for this. But I want to talk about something else that's important now with all the context, right? I'm talking about the banks, earnings. We're talking about the economy, how businesses are going to do, profitability, all of these different factors. I want to break something else that's very important down. How are we going to know if the market's going to crash? Well, here's the thing you have to remember. I don't know what's going to happen for the super long term for the market. I don't know how low it's going to crash to, and I don't believe it's right for me to just try to predict what's going to happen in like May, June, or something like that, right? It's just very difficult to predict very long term because of how the market is manipulated due to the options chain and the derivatives markets. But what I can tell you is right now, the trend is still in favor of the bulls. We're still in favor of the bulls. Like I said, we could pull back a little bit, but overall, there's no confirmation of the market crashing. But if the market is going to crash because of another bank failure or something like that, here's what you have to watch for. On SPY, look at the weekly 200 EMA. That's around this 360 level. Also, you have to watch around this 380 to 377 level. Those are two of the most important levels we have to watch for. Because if the market ends up tanking, I don't know if it's going to take a few weeks, a few months, who knows when. But if that ends up happening, right, because of a very bad piece of news, whatever's going to cause it, there's so many things that could cause it. If that happens, right, the algos right now are designed to continue to buy and hold up the markets, but they will adjust and start selling pretty hard if we break below 380 and then 377. If we break those supports, this thing is going to most likely start tanking. That's the reason why we have so much support around this like 375 to 380 zone on SPY. They're trying very hard to keep it up to stop it from selling off very hard. There are many reasons for that. Part of it is the options chain because so many people are shorting the market right now. Uh, Obviously, shorts are getting destroyed. But the second important level you have to watch for in case that does end up happening is going to be the 200 EMA once again. If we break below the 200 EMA on the weekly chart, which is below 363, if there's a lot of selling pressure and we start to see capitulation from retail and also other entities out there, and if we break the 200 EMA, we're most likely going to crash to October lows, if not lower. That's going to be a big signal for it. Now, why is this important? What does this have to do with Tesla? Well, the answer is the market's very bizarre right now because it's almost like the market's moving on one algorithm. That does not mean Tesla's always green when the market's green or Tesla's always red. I know the market could not, it may not have the strongest Monday, but Tesla could still be very strong on Monday with strong deliveries. So there are external factors. But the bottom line is Tesla does have a tendency of moving very closely with the markets. And if the market does end up crashing, that's going to negatively affect Tesla and cause Tesla to break all the way down back to low levels I mentioned previously, right? We have the big gaps in like the 180s, the 140s, and etc. So I just want to warn you all about this and just let you know in advance. But right now, like in the current time, I'm not seeing that happening. We're nowhere near, the 200s on the QQQ. We're at 320. SPY is nowhere near like the 380s, the 390s. We're all the way up almost at 410. So that's the reason why I'm just not necessarily like worried about it. I'm not really too concerned for the time being, but this all could change depending on sentiment. Sentiment right now is not super, super bearish. We're pretty neutral for the time being. We could be more greedy, if anything. So that's one of the things you have to remember. Another thing people are mentioning is the possible head and shoulders on SPY. Is this going to play out, right? There's a possible left shoulder here, the head right here, and the right shoulder. And we also have a slanted neckline, which means we could pump a little bit higher than the highs we made from this left shoulder. My answer to that is we have to watch the levels first for us to see if this will most likely play out or not. And so far, like we've been on this uptrend. There's no true indication that we're forming a right shoulder. It is very possible, but we need confirmation first. What that means is, will the market come up here and just start chopping a bit and end up projecting down? That would form the right shoulder. But if the market ends up breaking out eventually, if we break the high that was made right here, this like 416 level on SPY, if we break this, we're going to invalidate this head and shoulders. And this thing is most likely going to push for like 420 if we break like 416 or so. If we break the highs from that FOMC meeting that Jerome Powell was in, also his speech that Jerome Powell had, if we break these highs, then we could invalidate this. If that's the case, if this is the case, and the market is just ripping this hard, as long as Tesla has a good deliveries report and good earnings, Tesla could keep flying. It could really keep going from here. If the market does end up playing out that way. But if the market, if SPY rejects here, it's most likely going to be correlated with tech. There's no confirmation of it, but if that hypothetically happened, then that is a real possibility, and it is something we should consider, right? The right shoulder forming, us coming all the way back down. And then if we break the key levels I mentioned from like 380 to 377, then also the weekly 200 EMA, then yes, we could revisit October lows or even drop lower. But once again, this market is forgetful. The market is living in euphoria, and the market needs a catalyst. What is the catalyst going to be? Is it going to be a high inflation report? Is it going to be the Fed being more hawkish? Is it going to be the banks? Could it be something else we don't know right now, right? It could be so many different things. The market is going to choose what it is. That's why you have to be very ready and prepared. But that's the main reason why I've been shifting away on this channel from giving you guys like very long-term projections. And I'm just talking more short-term because the market is just crazy, very hard to predict. But I do want to note that it is possible for the market to make new lows. It is still possible because there are catalysts out there. We just don't know what the true catalyst will be yet. I say that not because of the fact that it's hard to predict. I'm saying that because of how the market interprets things. There could be, remember how bad news was good news and good news was bad news? The market interprets things differently all the time. That's what makes this very difficult. And that's why I don't want to talk about new lows right now. But it is a possibility. We just need the data and the info first. For Tesla, what does all of this mean? Well, if Tesla has a good deliveries, it could fly all the way up to retest these highs that we made back in February, if not break them. And if it gets to like the 220s, the market's likely going to help dictate it later on. It's most likely going to outperform the market for the most part if we have a very strong report. And then everything is going to depend on earnings, right? The bank earnings initially may cause Tesla to pull back a bit because I'm pretty confident bank earnings are not going to be that good. But then the real question is, and this is why I'm not talking about Tesla crashing or just like rallying really hard, it's going to depend heavily on Tesla's earnings. If Tesla gives us a strong earnings report again, if all the numbers and margins are on track and they do very well, it could continue to push up. It could keep going to these high levels all the way up here into the 230s and 240s. It is a possibility, right? But if earnings ends up being a flop, if their margins are just really bad and they miss on EPS or something, just hypothetically, Tesla rarely ever does that. But if that happens, it could, reverse big time. And if the market gets these like very negative catalysts that cause a crash, maybe later on, if that does end up happening, you also have to be prepared for downside for Tesla too, because the whole market comes down. And I'm not saying we're going to come down here like soon, but I do want to note that there are these gaps down here, like the 140s, the 180s, they have a tendency of getting filled. And if worse comes to show for the markets and the economy, the recession, obviously there's going to be a lot of fear associated with it. Once again, keep this in the back of your mind. If you are investing into Tesla, keep this in the back of your mind that downside could still come in the future, and we have to be prepared for it now just in case. All right. And I'm talking about like the future, a possibility for the medium to longer term future. I'm not talking about tomorrow or like next week. I'm not talking about the super short term. Short term, this thing is most likely going to remain bullish, most likely based off the technicals. But once again, it depends on the two major catalysts, which are deliveries and earnings for the month of April. All right, guys, so I hope I provided some more insights for you. I hope this was very clear. I hope I addressed a lot of concerns and questions about the market crash. I believe it's very likely the market will tank in the future. It's just that I don't know the exact timing. It's very hard for us to determine. And I don't want to, once again, talk about us breaking lows or anything like that right now. I just don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know which catalyst the market's going to choose to drop off of, whether it's CPI, PCE, some jobs numbers, GDP, or there's just so many different factors. And that's why it's best to just read the charts for the short term and just look at what the chart's telling you. The chart on Tesla is telling us, all right, we're going to react to data, but for the most part, it looks more bullish than bearish, all right, from a technical standpoint. We'll see what deliveries brings. Please be ready. And as I mentioned before, it's going to cause a very big move, whether it's to the downside or the upside. The odds are favoring the upside as of right now, but be prepared for anything. All right, thank you all for listening. I can't guarantee I'm going to release a video tomorrow. I don't know for sure if I'm able to, depending on my situation. I have a big family event to attend to. I don't know for sure. I may release a very short video, but if I do, that would be awesome. If not, please remember the levels I mentioned, remember the numbers and what the expectations are, and look at the headlines very carefully. And I believe personally, Tesla's going to break their record, but we'll see exactly where deliveries are. So thank you all for listening. Have a great weekend. Tesla to the moon. The long term is still very, very bright. And peace out.